one of the things that fills my heart with joy about Creative Brain Week is that over the course of the 3 main days, I become ignored more and more. So the kind of conversations that were just happening in the room are exactly the kind of conversations that we'd like to have, and it feels wrong to interrupt them. But I am going to bring you some extraordinary and fascinating and stimulating and interesting speakers. I'm also going to disappear in a magical way and hand you over to Nicholas Johnson, who is extraordinary in that he embodies Creative Brain Week. He currently straddles 2 worlds. He straddles the Department of Drama and TCI, and the Trinity Institute of Neuroscience, particularly the Global Brain Health Institute. So Nicholas will be your charming, erudite, and stylishly dressed host for the rest of the day while I'll be running around doing things. Over to Nicholas, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dominic. Wonderful to see you again, and a warm welcome to everyone for the second day of Creative Brain Week 2024, which is the midpoint of our 3rd year of this expanding conversation around the links between the creative arts, the science of creativity and the brain, and the practices and society around brain health. So my name is Nicholas Johnson. As you heard, I work both in the School of Creative Arts, where I'm an associate professor of drama, and in the Global Brain Health Institute, where I have a fractional role beginning this year as Arts and Health lead. And connections is a typically rich and multivalent theme. I say typical because it has the breadth, the kind of terrifying breadth that we know well from conversations with Dominic Campbell and broadly around GBHI. This year it serves as a bridge as well between attention and love, which I hope you'll agree is the right order. And I thought it might be helpful to launch some of the threads and strands that will emerge through our conversations across the day. If we begin at the micro level, we'll find connections inside the brain. A neuron by itself is not enough. We need them to connect to one another at the point of the synapse. But as many of the neuroscientists in the room will tell you, one synapse is not enough. The real complexity and potential of the human emerges when billions of these connections are firing in a networked, continuous, and linked fashion. And as Lorena and Alejandro were just saying, we need interaction between disciplines in order to understand how even one brain is not enough. It needs to connect to the world around it. For the purpose of learning, for the purpose of action, for any change to occur, it has to connect. For us in the School of Creative Arts, connection is a core value that drives how our fields operate. And we're thinking every day in terms of how to connect theory and practice, ideals and materials, intellect and emotion, and to say nothing of resources and people. We coordinate bodies in dance, but in theaters and in concert halls and in cinemas, we then coordinate heartbeats, we coordinate breathing, making contact with people that links them up in a networked operation without physical touch, necessarily. This extraordinary impulse of the arts to connect across people has also reached across time, as we reenact and reread classics to find some animating idea that holds relevance, and as we adapt and reperform this work to grasp a connection through time, to ancestors, and to our own history as a species. So universities, at their best, are spaces of this connection. And I'm sure you'll hear a lot today about silos, how to break them down, how to shift them, and all the interesting points of friction at which one field that's constructed through history seems to border and penetrate on another. So in this porous ecosystem, I'd like to introduce our speakers for the first 45 minutes and then for the second. What we'll do is we'll have about 45 minutes here from the very beginning in our session. And the morning session has, again, a kind of complex multivalent title. It is Technology, Storytelling, Connection, Health. We're trying to bridge a lot of fields here, as you can hear, but it suggests that we can use contemporary technology in ways to create some of these connections and imagination that deepen our belief and our relevance in terms of how humans interact. So we're going to open with 45 minutes from Marshmallow Laser Feast, represented here by Barnaby Churchill Steel. He'll be introducing the work of MLF as an experimental art collective. Their work reinterprets the idea of human perception and experience, employing a wealth of creative disciplines and underpinned by research, inviting participants to navigate sensory perception beyond the everyday, asking the question, where is the line between where we end and the world begins? Barnaby is an artist and creative director of the London-based studio Marshmallow Laser Feast. It's an experiential art collective, and their work represents the ideals of human perception and experience. They employ a wealth of different disciplines to invite participants to navigate sensory perceptions that go beyond the everyday, working in the liminal space between art, technology, and the natural world. Their expertise has earned them a reputation for creating transformative experiences, some of which you'll get to see on the slides, and reinvigorating a sense of wonder and deepening audience connections to the more than human world. Barnaby's art practice combines a wide range of disciplines. It includes sculpture, installation, live performance, and mixed reality. This work illuminates hidden natural forces that surround us, inviting us to navigate with a sensory perception that leads to profound revelation of our ecological embeddedness. Thank you all so much. And a please warm welcome for Barnaby Churchill Steel. Thanks. There is a hand just below you. Yeah, just underneath there. Is that better? Great.
Hello, hello.
There you are.
Wow, that sounded so serious, that intro. We're totally not serious. We're like, in fact, when Dominic invited me, I was like, great, it's my favorite hobby, putting my straw into scientists' brains and suckling all that research juice. I was thinking about a lot of the scientists and institutions we collaborate with. I think of them as like these slugs that are munching away into the fabric of reality, like these deep corners. And some of them, you've got huge institutions just like looking at the smallest thing, and they're all there like munching away, discovering, observing things that have not been seen before. And I'm like this little creature that kind of suckles on the slug juice, like all that juice that's made. And I'm interested in what is the experience of what's being discovered and observed. This is the kind of essence of what tickles my fancy, because it defines how I see myself and how I relate to the world around me. And I think that's kind of the essence of what we're doing. Probably need to work on our artist statement. It just sounds a little bit too serious. I thought I'd start with a little... Is the sound okay? Am I talking too loud? It's all fine? Yeah? Okay.
It might work now, actually, if you try it, I think.
Oh, hello? Hello.
Yeah.
Which, is this nicer?
You could go hands-free.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch microphones. So on the theme of connection, I thought I'd start with a little breathing meditation. I'm going off the deep end. It's not something I do regularly, but I'd like you to, well, firstly, keeping your eyes open. This animation that's on screen has a 5-second in, 5-second out breath rhythm. So let's start by following that. So breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. And breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. So keep with that deep breathing rhythm. And now you can close your eyes. And I just want you to imagine that the only thing you can see are these sort of dancing particles of oxygen. Now, if there was a tree or a plant in this room, I'd like you to imagine those particles swirling out of the plant and heading towards your mouth. Now, next time you breathe in, just imagine those particles flowing down and revealing your branching lungs. Then they're diffusing into your bloodstream and going to your heart center. And from there, they're moving out at about 3 feet a second up into the brain and then down into your hand. And just hold your hand up in front of your face and just imagine that you can see these particles moving almost like through a river delta. So passing out these tiny little blue particles and branching and diffusing into the bloodstream, and diffusing into the cells. Now, for those of you that have a scientific understanding, you can go into cellular respiration and you can understand the kind of marble run of what's happening. I don't fully understand that, but my point to this meditation, which we can end now, is that a scientific understanding adds to a sense of awe and wonder. It allows you to visualize and appreciate things that are going on in your own body and to see relationships that are hidden from human perception. And so that's the kind of sweet spot that we like to explore. Richard Feynman is one of my heroes. And this talk's quite long, so I muted it, and I thought I'd just like compress it. So he's talking about a friend of his who's an artist, and an artist has an aesthetic sensibility that's maybe more refined than Richard. So in looking at a flower, the artist can see details and maybe subtle variations that someone who's not an artist might not see so clearly. But then Richard talks about a scientist's perspective on the flower, that he sees the flower as a relationship between the pollinator, and there's this co-evolution. It asks the question, does the pollinator have an aesthetic sense like a human does? You can go into the dance of how sunlight is woven into glucose within the plant. And so there's all of these layers of reality that only ever add to a sense of awe and wonder. They never subtract. And I totally believe that. And I think our work is rooted in trying to open this sense of awe and wonder and shape people's experience of reality, almost like a lens or a story through which you see the world and see yourself within the world. I was in a desert in Israel, and we do a lot of immersive experiences with virtual reality, and I was borrowing a power from a band who was setting up. It was a Bedouin tribe, and he asked me, "Oh, what have you got there? Seeing all the technology, the computers, had this tracking system set up." And I started to explain the work I was doing. I was like, "Oh, okay, so we're exploring perception, and this piece is called In the Eyes of the Animal, and we're going to journey." And he held his finger up, and he just went, "Shh," until it touched my lips. And he said, "Tell me, what does an apple taste like?" And if you think about that, it's like, oh, it's crisp, sweet. How can you can't explain with words the richness of the experience of eating an apple. It's just impossible. It doesn't matter what words you use, the sensation goes way beyond language. And so then he was like, "Shut up talking and let me try it." So it had this, but that really stuck with me, because I think as we're engaging with the potential of new technologies to tickle the senses and create immersive experiences. And so a big part of that is understanding where the limits of language lie and what the experience of a phenomenon offers. And so that's a little brain fart that I thought I'd throw into the mix. Something else I've been thinking about is how technology shapes our relationship to the world. So, for example, to the naked eye, when a horse is running, it looks like this to the naked eye, that kind of galloping stride. But then through the invention of the camera and the frozen moment and sequencing images, suddenly you've got this image of a horse running. And probably our experiences of horses running are more through television screens where they're exploring slow motion or the frozen moment. So if you ask somebody to draw a picture of a horse running, they might well draw this instead of this, because our reality is shaped via the technology. It expands our perception and creates a sort of a connection to something as simple as a horse running that no human eyeball had ever seen until the invention of these certain technologies. And so it's interesting to think about, as technology evolves, how it shapes our relationship and expands perception. Again, when you're lying on your back looking up at the stars, our collective experiences of seeing the beauty of Hubble Space Telescope photography sits there in the backgrounds of our minds and adds a poetry and a beauty and a sense of awe and wonder to gazing up at the night sky. So again, it's like a sort of lens that sits between you and your experience of the world. I'm just going to switch the sound up on this. It's my business partner, Robin. He hates me putting this in the presentations, but I always... Virtual reality. So we discovered... We'd been exploring a lot of different stuff, and a lot of it was thinking about immersive experiences. And when virtual reality came on the scene, we imagined this project of like, okay, so in some ways, the headset is simulating what the human brain expects to see, and also hear, because it understands where you're looking. So you can take over the eyes and ears. And we thought, oh, wouldn't it be lovely if you could just put them onto a dragonfly or a frog or an owl. Like, how can we reflavor human perception to see the world through the eyes of another animal? And so for this project, well, actually, this quote's a goodie. Looking at the world from another species' point of view is a cure for the disease of human self-importance. I love that. In some ways, you can think about these kind of experiences as a form of empathy, in that you're able to step out of your normal human-centered perspective, although you're always a human. Obviously, this is a kind of poetic interpretation, but it does create the sense of embodying something more than human, and I think that's a powerful area to explore. I'll just show you a little video here of what we made. So it's a site-specific installation at Grisdale Sculpture Park. It was part of And Festival. And so we went to the location where the exhibition was going to be held. It was outdoors in a forest. We used a LiDAR scanner to 3D capture the section of the forest where our show was going to be. And then we worked with some scientists to explore what the world might look like through the senses of a mosquito, a dragonfly, a frog, and an owl. And so, for example, there's the dragonfly. Its eyeballs are rooted so close to its brain that its version or frame rate of reality is around sort of 300 frames a second, as opposed to our sort of 60 frames a second. So to embody the dragonfly, you're also going to see in broader color spectrums into the ultraviolet spectrum. And with the owl, we took this idea that your peripheral vision is really closed down. Oh, it's my dad.
Dudes, what a show! What a show! Unbelievable! Very clever. Amazing.
You know that, Dad? The mossy helmets were so fresh that there was worms climbing out of them while people in there. Okay,
On your pack.
and so for that, we also used a haptic backpack. So when you became the dragonfly, you felt the buzzing between your shoulder blades. And there's these little tickles that sort of push you into that feeling that you actually have become the dragonfly or the frog. One thing that we noticed was that when people took the headset off, they didn't go anywhere. They wanted to hang around and talk about it. There was a sort of boggy area where the frog was, and people were gathered round, say, "Oh yeah, Janice, we were down there." And then we got eaten because it's a food chain thing. Got eaten. We flew up into that was the tree, and it was interesting because again, it was this idea that an immersive experience can create a perspective shift that sticks with you afterwards. And again, back to this idea of a lens through which you see the world. So the next project, while we were in the forest, we were obviously brainstorming about the potential of this new medium. And it was really exciting to think about expanding perception, and something like a tree that is so familiar to us. In some ways, it's you've got this dimension of time, which is this barrier between the human sense of reality and tree time. So the idea of accelerating time, but also what if you could see through the bark? You'd start to think of a tree as more like a river estuary, that it's connected to this cosmic energy that's flowing in from the sun. And through the process of photosynthesis, the golden glucose is flowing down and feeding the entire food web. So thinking of a tree as a river estuary and accelerating time, we started to explore some new artworks. So this piece here, we went out to the Amazon and we've been doing, I guess, a series of tree portraits where we go and visit a significant tree. This is a K-pop tree. And again, we're using LiDAR scanners, working with local indigenous communities and scientists, and just really making the bark transparent to be able to think about a tree as this lung of the planet through which we're connected to. Here you've got the blue of the water flowing up and the golden glucose flowing down. I think there's something interesting about this simple perspective shift where you start to think of a tree as something in constant motion and exchange, like you would with a river estuary, but then that relationship is also connected to you through the outbreath of the tree and through the flow of the nutrients that it's capturing and the food that we consume. So in a way, by exploring a tree, you're exploring an extension of your own body in that you're tied into relationship to it. So the technology moved on. Virtual reality became untethered so that you could explore larger spaces. And this took us to this idea of, well, what would it be like to experience your breath in relationship to a tree and to be able to step through inside the bark and maybe journey to the canopy? So we created this experience called We Live in an Ocean of Air. David Abram. So The Spell of the Centuries was a big inspiration for a lot of the work we do. And I'll just read this quote here. Breathing involves a continual oscillation between exhaling and inhaling, offering ourselves to the world at one moment and drawing the world into ourselves at the next. So it's actually through breath that you can weave yourself into relationship with the living world. And so for this project, we had a breath sensor that dangled down just in front of your mouth. And so that could detect every time you were breathing out. We had a heart rate monitor on your ear, and we had hand tracking as well, which was attached to the front of the headset. And so what that allowed us to do is in the experience, you could breathe out and see the plumes of carbon dioxide as they leave your lips. And those plumes started to weave themselves into the forest around you as it gradually revealed. Meanwhile, the exhalation of the plant kingdom was flowing into these blue plumes in the air. And as you breathed in, they would flow into your lungs and then into your whole cardiovascular system. And so when you hold up your hand, driven by your own heartbeat, you can see the movement of oxygen through your hands and also through the other people that share the experience with you. It's designed for 7 people at a time, and often people end up kind of like holding hands and exploring. It's often not the hand that they think it is. They might think they're with their girlfriend, but they end up with someone completely different. And that was kind of wonderful because when you take the headset off, it's like within that experience, you're reducing the human form to these avatars that are the underlying branching networks that we all share with each other and also with the natural world. So that kind of transparency of skin makes race and gender evaporate. And it was a really interesting, I think it wasn't intentional that people would get confused, but we loved it that was happening all the time. And it felt like when the headset comes off, suddenly you connect to somebody and based on, I guess, all of the prejudices or assumptions on how somebody looks. My mum and dad.
And I felt nourished. It's as if you're feeling nourished by the tree, and you see the interaction between yourself and the tree. It's incredibly moving to really understand the sort of the process of collaboration between you and nature.
My dad's itching.
We are completely at one with it. You are at one with it. You're not the boss. You're part of it.
Absolutely.
It's quite wonderful. It's terrific.
I love my mum and dad. They're very encouraging. I'm very blessed. Every time they try an experience, I'm like, quick, they're in, get the cameras. And when they come out, but actually my mum cried on one, so I wasn't allowed to show that one, but it does make me very proud. So I think an experience like that, it actually crescendos at the canopy of the tree. And so there's huge rivers of oxygen flowing into all of the participants. So you're just kind of umbilically connected through breath in a way that it's pretty trippy. I mean, we definitely, we get our inspirations from certain places, but it's, I'm not gonna, So moving on. So thinking, so it's like, oh, well, okay, so we've followed breath into the tree. What if we could breathe ourselves down our own bodies? Like, what's that journey? Follow the out-breath of the tree into the human body. And so we started to think about that. And Alan Watts is one of our big inspirations. A lot of our, I guess, beliefs or underlying philosophies are rooted in this idea of non-separation. Actually, there's a a chap called David Hinton that wrote a book called Existence, A Story. And in that book, he's looking at a single Chinese landscape painting, and this sort of Taoist practice of creating the painting is super fascinating. You start with a completely empty canvas, which represents nothing, and as you apply the ink and start watercoloring in the clouds and the mountains and the trees, and eventually you get to yourself and you draw yourself from this third-person perspective. That practice is essentially thinking of reality as existence tissue. That's the way he describes it. So there's no separation, that everything is woven into relationship. So every atom in existence exists in relationship to everything else. I think that's we're kind of looking at that through the lens of science, and the simple, obvious thing is exploring breath, but there's lots of different relationships and connections that you can explore, that science is telling us those stories, that sort of ancient wisdom was telling us through maybe a different perspective. So anyway, this idea of the human body, we started to dive into that. And the first port of call, once we've got a little brain fart like, I want to breathe myself into my own body, it took 4 years. And I saw this by the Fraunhofer Institute, MAVIS, which was showing blood flow through the heart. And I thought, oh man, that's mad. Like, no one's ever seen that before. It stopped me. I thought, okay, so this is an fMRI sort of time-lapse sequence, and then they've analyzed like the black and white data set to determine the speed and velocity and direction of particles. And so this became, I emailed them from the YouTube link, and they were open to collaborating. And so we worked together with them over a sort of 4-year period. There was lots of iterations. We produced a number of artworks. And just the other week, we finished a little film about that. So I was just going to play this. Film. Oh, I forgot I'd put this in. This was one of our first attempts. When we got the data from them, we work in a whole load of different softwares. A lot of it's real-time and some of it's Houdini. So this was some of our early look development on taking their data set and translating it into a more aesthetic animation. So I'm jumping around a bit here. I'm gonna play the film in a minute. I tuck these slides in. So right at the beginning, once we'd had this idea of exploring the human body as an ecosystem and following the journey of breath, we create these kind of images that are essentially, what if the human body was scaled to the size of a forest and the skin was transparent, and actually all you saw was the journey of oxygen? Then you could walk through that ecosystem, and the sensation of it would be like observing streams and observing like giant oak trees that are filling and bellowing. And so this was the kind of starting point of the vision. Great, so I'm going to play the film now.
Put your finger on your wrist and find your pulse. This beat is with you every moment of your life. Imagine the shape of your heart, the pulsating form which is the foundation of human life. 100,000 kilometers of blood vessels run through the human body, pumping 7,000 liters of blood a day. The beauty of this process is the foundation for a series of collaborations between Marshmallow Laser Feast and Fraunhofer MAVIS, using medical imaging data to reveal the familiar landscape of our bodies in ways never seen before. The researchers at the Fraunhofer Institute for Digital Medicine, MAVIS, develop software systems for image and data-based early detection, diagnosis, and therapy. To enable a broader audience to engage with rapid developments in digital medicine, they create sci-art installations, both independently and through collaborations with artists. One powerful research tool MAVIS uses is the MR scanner, which delivers high-resolution 3D images from inside the human body. This makes it possible to detect diseases without invasive procedures. In one research project, the scientists achieved something remarkable. Using the MR data and their in-house software, they were able to digitally reconstruct patients' blood flow trajectories. The MeVis researchers are deeply fascinated by the beauty of the now visible blood flow and want to share it with the world outside science. The result is a 3D film showing the speed and direction of blood flow in a human heart. This film inspired London-based artist collective Marshmallow Laser Feast, MLF. MLF's work is rooted in the transformative potential of immersive experiences, often employing the knowledge, methods, and data of scientific institutions as a lens through which to expand perception. The artists were exploring the idea of perspective shifts as a way of igniting a sense of awe and wonder, similar to the overview effect astronauts describe when seeing the Earth from space. MLF asked the question, is it possible to create a biological overview effect by shifting people's perspective on the ecosystem of the human body? MLF and MeVis dived into an extensive collaboration, sharing ideas and techniques to make the invisible visible, the starting point of which was the human heart.
We got really carried away.
The scientists' data described the speed and direction of the blood flow through the 4 chambers of the heart and the aorta. MLF built a full digital model of a cardiovascular system and ran particle simulations through it, branching out from there into the rest of the human body. The tree-like lungs, where oxygen meets the blood. The brain, where highly detailed MR data from MeVis revealed the symmetry of meandering arteries. And on into the limbs, where branching algorithms were used to extend detail into capillaries and into the fingers. To the tips of the toes. Fluid simulations projected how air flowed through the mouth and nostrils and into the lungs. The result is a series of immersive installations. The Tides Within Us uses screens as windows into the world beyond the limits of our senses, allowing audiences to peer beneath the skin, looking beneath our notions of age, race, and gender to reveal universal human truths. The second project, Evolver, is a collective virtual reality experience that drops audiences deep inside the landscape of the body, following the flow of oxygen through our branching ecosystem to a single breathing cell. Through this transcendental narrative, it becomes clear that breath sparks life and connects us to the natural world through the cycle of respiration. Where does the living body begin, and where does it end? By revealing the tidal rhythms of oxygen flowing through the human ecosystem, these projects challenge notions of the boundaries between us and our environment. We flow into the world, and the world flows into us.
That was my friend's mum doing the voiceover. Michelle Newell. Oh, thank you. So I was going to just sort of finish up with a few slides, but then because I've got like an extra 5 minutes, I was going to brainstorm. So I'll finish the presentation. Then I wanted to just talk about some things that I want to make. So Terence McKenna, key influence. Nature is not our enemy to be raped and conquered. Nature is ourselves to be cherished and explored. And while I'm making these projects, I'm constantly looking out for these sort of symmetries. Thank you. So that's the end of the main bit. But I do have a few minutes. So yeah, I'd like to just take this last 5 minutes just to talk about why I'm here and sort of back to the suckling side of things, the brain suckling. So but essentially, this, you can think of that whole human body as just an introduction. It's like a trailer to a whole world of possible experiences. We really want to dive into the nervous system, and I think there's all sorts of fascinating experiences when you start to think about experiencing like having an out-of-body experience of your own senses. So as an example, what if you could just glide out of your normal head position, shrink down and end up tiny in your ear? And then when you do that, those sound waves are going to come through, and like a sort of wind through a cornfield, you'll see how it translates through the hair movements into electrochemical signals, and then you could just walk through to see the wiring of the brain. How do our senses translate to structures within the brain and illuminations of the nervous system? You could be really small as well. Somebody could tickle your finger over here, and you'd see the illumination of that. So you could be in this vast body, and you're kind of like in the brain. You can see. Or what structure does it take when you think about your mum? I don't know if they've got the data on that, but like there's all sorts of fascinating ideas about, I guess, thinking about perception, but also about consciousness. So exploring the senses from a sort of out of body, inside the body perspective, but also just, I guess there's this deep mystery about the way our reality kind of manifests via the senses into the black box of the brain. I'm a big fan of Anil Seth and the way he talks about sort of reality as this like shared hallucination. And I'm not quite sure where projects like that would lead, but rooting them in the beauty of the data, firstly, like what has been observed, what do we know, what has been mapped, and just the ability to be able to participate and have your own body as a sensory input to the virtual experience could be really fascinating. I think there's lots of potential in that. And in the same way, we're working on a number of projects focused on forest ecosystems. And one of the pieces that we're trying to get off the ground at the moment is that you would lie down on the forest floor and you take your last breath. And then time starts to accelerate. So you get the sun moving through the sky. It's moving faster, 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 faster. Then it starts to sort of hum, day, night, day, night. And there's a certain point where when you're filming a car wheel, it stops going forward and it sort of gets this weird little hum where it looks like it's static. And so you can think of that hum as like this sort of trippy introduction into plant time where day and night are just sort of resonating at this sort of, the wheel stops spinning. And then in that moment, it's like train spotting where you sink down into the carpet, and a bit like a bath bomb, your body starts to unspool and spread out. Mushrooms flower through your chest, and you get to go on this crazy journey of what you would call you, as in like the material of your body, flows into all these other life forms. And so that relationship of death into life is something that I think is a complete celebration, and it's essential to us existing in the first place. You know, sort of spooling out into the soil through the roots of trees. You could go on a journey up into a plant and flower. There could be all of these wonderful narratives that unfold, and I think that's something that we're keen to make. And you could imagine that as a combination of the forest work we've done with the human body. And so we put them in the one virtual world, and they're like starting points for then this next chapter. And I feel like long term, we really want to be able to show these works as touring exhibitions. This is how we do it at the moment. So we show at different art galleries and science institutions. And so that's like one part to what we do. We're planning to release them onto app stores so that we can reach larger audiences. And we're primarily motivated by how bonkers reality is, and we just want to explore it, but then thinking about how that could translate to education areas. And ultimately, I've got a 5-year-old boy, and he tries all the stuff, and I can see how powerful it is in shaping the way he thinks about the world, like even down to his own body. Like when we were doing the Evolver piece, he's now got a kind of mental picture of like blood flowing through his body, but he's also thinking about everything that he eats is flowing through that and coming out of him. So he's got this concept of himself through these experiences where he's like this fluid organism that exists in relationship to what he eats and drinks and breathes. So I think long term, think of us like Attenborough with a black and white wind-up camera. We're at the birth of this whole crazy immersive technology, virtual reality, and like the trajectory of that is driven by huge companies. And I'm hoping that when I'm Attenborough's age, we'll have made these experiences that tell the story of interbeing and interrelationship, and that would be the mark that I'd love to leave. Thank you.
Barney, thank you so much. It's just wonderful to be able to experience both the material, but also the exuberance that you bring to the table to help us think it through and talk about it. So we have a good little 2 to 3 minute, maybe 5 max, little pause here, which is a moment for interbeing. So we're going to just take a little pause while there's a quick technical transfer of one machine to the other, and we'll be coming back for a conversation for the next 45 about My Brain Robbie, and then at the end of that session, we'll bring everyone back on stage, and we'll connect this to the discussion so far. So if you'll just be patient for a moment, take your smooth in-breath, out-breath, and we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Thanks.